So several years ago, I used to work in firearms retail. Excuse me, and through a program through Ruger, I was able to, uh, based on the number of Ruger firearms that I sold at that time, I earned points for each one I sold, and I was able to use those points to purchase a Ruger firearm or select a Ruger firearm for free. And based on the number of points that I had earned at the end of the contest, I wound up getting a Ruger LCR 357 version. I did really like the firearm, and I carried it often, but what I ran into with it at the time was I was trying to find a way to carry ammo for reload, to reload it once fired. And I didn't want to mess around with standard speed loaders, which you can get for that revolver, but the issue with standard speed loaders and that revolver is the Hogue grip that it comes with. There's a little dish out on the grip on the side the cylinder swings out to, but I'd talk to people and I'd tried a couple of them out, and it was always kind of a fumble because the plastic on the side of the speed loader had a tendency to catch on the rubber grip when I was trying to fit it in, and I just didn't like that. So in the end, I wound up going with the speed strips, that each speed strip holds 5 rounds, and then Tough Industries, I believe it was, made a belt holder that would hold 2 of those speed strips, and it would fit over your belt, and then when you would pull the Velcro flap open, it gave you access to both speed strips very easily and very rapidly. You could do your reload, and you'd do 2 at a time, and then that final round would go in because the revolver only held 5 rounds. But before discovering that, I was trying to figure out what I could make to carry on my belt. So I came up with a prototype that held 5 rounds, and that's what I'm going to show you now. So I wanted to make it out of Kydex, but before I could make it out of Kydex, it was going to be impossible to form the Kydex, which that's what you see right here. But it was going to be impossible to form the Kydex by hand to be able to give the rounds the retention that they needed so they wouldn't slip out when they were on my belt. So what I came up with was I made this wooden jig, and I used a piece of 2x4 that I had, and then I picked up a package of these wooden dowels that were approximately the same diameter as a 38 special round, and that worked okay. So then I wanted it to be able to contour to my waist, as you see here, how it's got the contour, so that it would be more comfortable on my hip. And it was going to ride basically, I carry strong side, so this was going to ride basically an appendix carry position, and that way I could reach down and grab the rounds to load the revolver properly. And so I cut this piece of wood on the curve to match the contour of my waist, and then individually cut these grooves into it. Basically those, I believe, it's been quite a few years, but I believe I just hand filed those with a round file. And then there's a groove on each side here, and then I just used wood glue and wood glued those hardwood dowels into place, and that way they could match up like this. And then I heated the front piece of Kydex up, set it down in there, and just clamped it together. And it took a little bit of fitting and a little bit of finagling with this several times until I got it to clamp down on the rounds the way I wanted. and then the back piece I just heated up with a heat gun, and then to get it to match the contour, and then went from there with the drilling and screwing and setting of the Chicago screws. And then to adjust the tension, there's a rubber gasket down inside there, and that rubber, or I should say a rubber washer, and that allows me to tighten or loosen the screws to get the appropriate tension on the rounds that I wanted. Now, as you can see, I never finished it with belt loops or anything, because before I got to that point, I had discovered the speed strips, which I knew about the speed strips, but I didn't have a good way of carrying them. So in the beginning, I was just, after I got the speed strips, I was just dropping them in my front pocket, and then I found the nylon pouch specifically for them, and that was that until I sold the revolver. The reason I sold the revolver is because, as I stated, I had purchased the 357 version, which has the polymer frame and the steel upper receiver. The LCR is essentially an upper and lower receiver. The lower frame is polymer, which assists with recoil absorption along with the Hogue grip, and then the upper on the 38 version is aluminum with a steel barrel and parts, and then on the 357 version it's a steel upper with a steel barrel and internal parts, which added to the weight. Once I got it and realized how light the recoil was with 38 plus P loads, that's all I carried in. I wasn't going to carry 357 rounds. I've got arthritis in my thumb joints, so heavy recoil hurts my hands anyway. So I figured the 38 plus P is going to be equivalent to a 9mm plus P, and so that's what I went with. And I was carrying predominantly Hornady critical defense loads in it. So these were just some reloads I had laying around that I was using for the prototype. Anyway, I sold the revolver to purchase something else, but I intend on replacing it at some point. Now they have a 3-inch LCR with a full-size grip, which is probably what's going to replace the other LCR at some point. But I just thought I would show you this prototype. Like I said, it never came to full fruition, but it's got good retention on the rounds, which makes it easy to pop them out one at a time and reload the revolver. So there's that little prototype that I was working on, and I planned on utilizing these two outer screws, which close the ends up. I was going to use those for the belt loops as well. Like I said, I just never got around to finishing them, and I had actually considered possibly going with a paddle which would have connected off of probably these two center screws. But then I thought, no, I want it held down securely, so I was going to use the two outer ones with belt loops. So there's project number 1 that I'm showing off. All right, thank you. So this is what I came up with, which you see here. But before I could make this to form these loops for the rounds, I had to make a jig, because there was no way I could form those by hand and get them tight enough or uniform enough for the rounds. So I came up with this jig, and I used this piece of 2x4 wood that I had laying around. This is actually, believe it or not, this piece of wood came off of a Liberty Safe display. I was back around 2009, 10, somewhere in that range. I was an authorized Liberty sales rep at a large firearms retailer and sporting goods store. And so Liberty came in and changed their display. So we took down this big wooden display, and I brought all the wood home. And I've used it over the years for numerous projects, but this was one of them I used it for. So they were 2x4s that had been milled down to quite a bit smaller dimensions. The total dimensions, I think, were 1.5 by 3, maybe even less than that. Let's see. Yeah, 1.25, just under 1.25 by 3, versus originally, yeah, even less than 3, 2.5. So anyway, it was milled down lumber, but it had a nice finish to it. So I marked out the curve that I wanted to use to contour to my waist, because the idea was to carry this in appendix to be able to access the rounds and load them into my revolver. So I marked the curve, and then you can see some of the pencil marks on there where what I did was I marked the curve, and then I marked a second curve about 1/8 of an inch back, and I drilled each of these holes on the second curve, which gave me about 1/8 of an inch in here curve that each of these dowel rods could fit into. So they're actually inset on a curve, and that made it easy for me to glue all these in position and give me enough width in between to have the width for the screw in between each round. And then as I tried it out, I had to go in here with a file and hand file some of these to get them to contour and fit properly, so that I would have room for the Kydex to mold in there. And so I built the jig, and then after some trial and error, I got to this point. Now, my intention initially was to use these 2 center screws right here to get the so the intention was to use these 2 center screw holes, and that's what I was going to attach originally, either these 2 center ones or these 2 outside ones here, these two a paddle, so I could just slide it on my belt like a paddle holster. But in the end, I decided I would do belt loops and connect it to these 2 outside screws here. But in the end, because I never finished the project, I did not need those. So let me show you what I wound up using instead. Okay, so here's what I wound up using. These are quick strips by Tough Products, and each one for that revolver holds 5 rounds. So they're real simple. You just they're tough to get in to begin with, so they have the retention, but you kind of hook it in and then just roll the round in. So you hook it and roll it, and then they snap in just like this. And then you now have your 5 rounds in this quick strip. And then this particular sheath, what it allows you to do is to slide the quick strip in like that. And there's room in here for 2 of them with this elastic retainer in between. So if I take this one and load it up, snap them in, hook, roll, hook the bottom, snap it in, just like that. Now they're good retention. And then the second clip speed strip goes in like that. And then this flap here allows you to put your belt in there and then bring the flap over. And then when you're wearing it like this, you just pull it open, and now your strips are available for to quickly grab them and put them in. And you can orient them either direction you want. whether you're right-handed, left-handed, however you load your revolver. And then you just grab that. And then the way they work is you'll take your revolver, and basically I like to bring my finger up, put in between, and then if this is your cylinder, you're going to slide those 2 rounds in, and then just slide them into the cylinder and just peel it back. Then you go to the next 2, peel it back, and then the last one, and I just ripped it. Huh. Well, I guess they aged out because I carried them for quite a few years. But either way, this flap here would still allow you to pull it off. So that's what the system I went with, and I no longer needed my prototype, so that project got retired to the back burner, and it sits in my box of prototypes. So there you go, the 38 Special / 357 Kydex belt-mounted ammo carrier that never became. Thanks for watching. Alright, sticking with the prototype theme, I also needed a holster, and when I purchased that gun there weren't a whole host of holsters available. So yet again I dug into my bag of tricks when it came to Kydex, and wound up making my own paddle holster for that Ruger LCR. As you see here, I had an extra paddle from Blackhawk for their Serpa line, so I co-opted that paddle to work with this holster. And being a revolver, that adds to the difficulty because of the cylinder sticking out both sides. So had this been a semi-auto, I probably would have done all of the molding on one side and just had the back side slightly contoured to fit my body and matched up to the paddle. Now, the other challenge that comes into play is connecting the paddle while keeping the screws away from the frame. And in the end, they still contacted the frame of the gun a little bit. But these Chicago screws here are aluminum, so really all they did was leave a little bit of aluminum marking on the gun. It didn't really hurt it. But the challenge was, what I would do is I would heat up the Kydex, and then right in the area where the screw hole was, and then I would insert the Chicago screw quickly and pull it to create a dish here that the head of the screw could sink into slightly. And it doesn't really show that well, but like the one down inside, that one sunk in pretty good. And that one wasn't contacting the gun. It was one of these up here that was slightly scraping on the frame, the upper receiver of the LCR. But you can see I did manage to get really good molding, and you'll see even an imprint of the trigger right there. Don't worry, the way that it worked is that when the gun went in, that would spread open slightly, and it did not contact the trigger in a way that it could pull the trigger. It would just set on the trigger as it closed back up. When you withdrew the gun, it was actually pulling away from the trigger, so it was not contacting the trigger in any way that it could discharge the firearm. So don't worry about that. The retention was really, really good. I sculpted it and scooped it down so that I could get my full grip on the revolver before drawing it. But it was kind of, even with the paddle, it kind of stuck out a little bit further than I wanted, and it printed more than I wanted. Rather than going back and completely redesigning this system, I kept this for that gun as a holster that I could use where I was traveling, where I was going in and out of permissible or non-permissible environments. So like when I went to work where I could not carry, when I would come out of work, I could grab this out of the console, the lock console in my truck, go ahead and slap it on my belt, and then for the trip home, if I stopped at a gas station or whatever, I was able to quickly and easily have this put on my belt and still conceal carry. For normal daily concealed carry of it, I wound up buying the DeSantis gun hide and leather holster, which was molded specifically for the gun, and it fit much tighter to my body and concealed better. So this was just one more semi-prototype, but it was a prototype that got a lot of use over the years before selling the firearm. And when I sold the firearm, I opted to keep this, and I sold it with the leather DeSantis holster. So there you go. One more Ruger LCR prototype along with the prototype ammo carrier that I made. So this one, however, made it to finish product. This one did not. Thanks for watching.